Hey guys, Brian Jodas here for this episode of Pick Up the Six podcast, and this one's brought to you by my friends at Allbirds. Go to allbirds.com. They've got loads of great shoes, socks, apparel. It's excellent. I'm wearing a pair of men's Tree Dasher 1s right now. They're my favorite, just casual, hanging around, working, got to throw a sneaker on and go kind of shoe. And if you go to their website right now, allbirds.com, those Tree Dashers are on sale. And here's the best part. We're going to get you a free pair of socks. If you spend over $50 at allbirds.com and you use the code PICKUPTHESOCKS at checkout, you throw a pair of socks in your cart, they're going to be free. Just like that. They're throwing some free socks at you. Go to allbirds.com, get whatever you need, spend over $50, use the code PICKUPTHESOCKS and save today some of the most comfortable shoes in the game. It's allbirds.com and use our promo code PICKUPTHESOCKS and get you a free pair of socks today on them. Thank you guys for the partnership. At 4 a.m., while on watch, Captain JC Soto received an interesting call. His helicopter crew stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana was needed to rescue a 62-year-old man stuck in his snowbound hunting cabin. Soto and his team sprung into action for an incredible story about picking up the six, and he joins us on this show to share that story. Brian Jodas back once again for another episode of Pick Up the Six podcast, and I'm excited to have this one today. Captain JC Soto is going to join us, and he was part of a crew that quite literally picked somebody's six up. You had a guy that was struggling. Winter weather came in the Montana area, and these guys had to spring into action to help a civilian, and it's a bit of a different sort of military story. You know, you guys often think about, our military members in uniform heading down range and through wartime efforts for what they do, but there's so much that's involved in rescue missions. And in fact, we go all the way back, if you guys remembered, episode 2 of this podcast, where we talked to Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Spanky Peterson, who was part of an Air Force Reserve crew out of Arizona that ends up in Afghanistan during the global war on terror. And these guys, their biggest training was in sort of search and rescue. And they were tasked with, on that day, in a Pave-Hawk helicopter, rescuing Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, during Operation Red Wings. And so all the training that goes into the work that these men and women do, it gets put into different scenarios. So with that as the backdrop, Captain Soto, it's great to have you today. How are you?
Thanks. Glad to be here. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thrilled to do this. It's funny. My dad, Air Force guy, 36 years in the Air Force. My brother, major in the Space Force. So obviously big fan of what you guys are doing. But from time to time, he'll send me articles. And he sent me an article from, I think it was the Air Force website, man, af.mil. He's like, look at what these guys did. This is a Pick Up the Six story. Going to help this 62-year-old guy who's in some serious pain in a snowbound home. And I was like, he said, you should get him on the show. I said, roger that, sir. Anytime the general tells me to do something, we tend to do it. Right. So we reached out and we got connected to public affairs and here we are to share the story. So I thought that was kind of funny the way it all works itself out. So when the general says to do something, JC, we hop to it.
I feel it.
That's good, man. Hey, how'd you get in the Air Force? We're going to talk about your crew and helping that individual who's in need, but man, captain in the Air Force. I'd just love to know your story a little bit.
Yeah, no, kind of a classic story. My grandfather served and then my dad, they were both guardsmen, in Arizona. That's where we're from. And then I decided to break the mold a little bit, go active duty. And I went to Northern Arizona University. Yeah. Did ROTC there.
Flagstaff, right?
Oh yeah. Go Jacks. It's the best.
Lumberjacks, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's gorgeous up there. So went there, did ROTC there, commissioned out of there, grabbed a pilot slot. I did the class, they've kind of changed it a little bit. So I did the fixed wing training first, pilot training up at Enid, Oklahoma Advanced Air Force Base.
Yeah, man. I spent a couple years in Wichita Falls.
Okay.
Outside of Shepherd Air Force Base. Not too far from where you were in Oklahoma, but
yeah. They actually, it's funny. I'd never seen a section line before. They're like, hey, you're going to get up in the air and it's going to look like patchwork, like quilts. And I'm like, what? Okay. And I'll never forget, like first time you're so busy, right? You're running a checklist, you're trying to talk and fly. And I remember like looking out of the cockpit and then like it literally for miles and miles and miles, it looked like quilt work. Does that part of the country with all the different forms of the section line? Right. And then it's funny.
A little bit of gray, a little bit of green, a little bit of brown, a little bit of,
yeah. Use it to navigate too. You're like, okay, you got to go a couple miles. You can count the lines, but, way different from Arizona, right? Grew up and raised in Arizona, so different part of the country for sure. Kind of a shock. But yeah, so after T6s, I elected to go rotors. So it kind of branches off, and you go down to Fort Rucker, Alabama. They have a little Air Force like detachment there. The 23rd Flight Training Squadron is awesome. They fly the TH-1, so it's a Huey, but it's got some upgrades, single engine.
Yep.
It's got a glass cockpit. It's a beautiful aircraft. An awesome program down there. Loved it. Had a good time. And then I'm new to the Huey world, the N model world. I actually flew the HH-60G Pavehawk. So I flew, my first station was at Nellis, the 66 Rescue, Combat Search and Rescue.
Yep. Las Vegas, right?
Yep, out of Las Vegas. So I spent about 2.5 years there. Got 2 deployments with those guys. And at the end, the wife and I made some changes, put in for Hueys. Some people made some stuff happen behind the scenes, really did me a favor. And after we had the kiddo, and we came to Malmstrom, which is awesome because it's like, this was my first choice, like fly an N model in Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So where are you guys? Tell me a little bit about that area. I've never been there. I don't know much about it. I've got a good friend who's from Montana, and he talks about sort of Malmstrom Air Force Base. And in our upbringing, it was never a place that we went or visited or anything like that. It was just my dad's trajectory and fighters and everything. That wasn't an area we ever went or knew anything about.
For sure. No, it's the same. I'd heard about it from a lot of my buddies went Hueys, right? It's kind of a smaller program at Rucker, but I'd never heard of it. So they consider it like central Montana, but I would say like north central. We're pretty far up in the north tier bases. It's one of 3 missile bases, major missile bases. I love it because it's kind of a confluence of, you have the Rocky Mountain Range to your west. You got some smaller mountain ranges to the south and southeast. It's not quite wide open plains, right? You're not looking like Nebraska or anything like that, or Kansas, because you visually can see all the mountain ranges, but it does have that kind of plains butts up against the foothills, which obviously butts up against the mountains. You're probably an hour plus flight time to Canada. You're close enough to the Northwest that we can make a day flight to like Spokane and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome. I love it. It's but super mountainous, big mountains, stuff like that. You have like the Little Belts, the high woods, obviously the Rocky Mountain chain. So that's what's kind of surrounding this area. Nice. It's a little unique because actually Malmstrom doesn't have an active runway, what makes it kind of strange.
That is a little different.
Yeah, no. So that was new to me too. I remember the first time coming from Nellis, right? Big fighter, weapons school, the runway closed off all the time. And like you get out here and there's just a helicopter movement area, what's this called? And it's like, I can just walk right onto it. I can walk from my building directly to the helicopter in a matter of like 50 yards. It's awesome. We're the only like flying show in town. I love it. It's really close to Great Falls International Airport. So we have that airspace, but otherwise it's just us here. It's the helicopters.
You get a chance to ski Big Sky at all and enjoy any of that kind of life out there?
Look, man, we're gonna get into fly fishing, but I stay away from the skiing. Going to my buddies would always be like, dude, you gotta come, we gotta hit the mountain. They always come back in like crutches or in some kind of braid.
Right. No, I'm good on all that.
No, I'm good. I'll watch.
You like fly fishing in that area, right? Plenty to do.
We're just getting into it. We got here in June. Like I said, we came from a different base. And so we got here in June, kind of got all settled in. By the time we realized what awesomeness we had at our doorstep, the weather had rolled in. But I went out a couple times, just to Missouri, went on the mow and kind of waded in and stuff. So we're hoping to get into that as it starts to thaw here. Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to November the 13th, right? That's when this instance went down, and basically paint the picture for me, man. Tell our listeners just what happened on that day and what you guys were tasked with doing, because you're essentially doing kind of search and rescue on somebody who is in some peril, in some need, and call on the good guys, bring in the Air Force.
Yeah. So there's like a whole process for this through the Air Force EC, the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center, and how it came down to me. So it was my first standby alert shift. So the idea is like you're not living in the building, which we can do. We can do 24/7 alert, and we're getting up to that level. But it was, just have your phone on you, have it on, the ringer loud, have your uniform ready and all that kind of stuff. And I live on base, so it makes my life really easy. My wife was actually out of town. It was my first alert shift. So I was like, you know what? My parents wanted to come see Montana anyways, come up. And if you guys could just hang out just in case anything happens, because we have 18-month-old. So I was like, I got to go when I got to go.
It's good to have some backup.
Right. Back up anyways, right? So get some sleep. But
tell me about it.
they but everyone was like, take it seriously, but we haven't been called in a while. It's your first alert shift too. So right, it'd be fine. No way.
Right.
Call at like, I think it was like 4 a.m. This first call I got from, it was kind of indirect, the security forces folks that are at the 40th we're a combined squadron. They integrate with us, hold basically like a phone alert. They're sitting always on duty. There's an airman on duty. They'd gotten the call from the sheriff, and this process had started kind of at the same time, right? So people are coordinating with the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center, and we are getting a call through us like, hey, wake everybody up, let's go. And so I was the first one to get the call because I live on base, and it was like, hey, I need you to come to the squadron like now and start figuring out, because get the truth data, like how far is this? What's the feasibility? What's the weather looking like?
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, because I'm just a co-pilot.
At this point, like, this is pretty serious. Something's going on that needs our help.
Yeah. And like, I'm not the aircraft commander. Like I said, I started fresh here. So like I have some experience doing this. I used to do the combat search and rescue thing. So I'm thinking that way. But as far as Hueys go and this base and the protocol, I'm like, whoa, okay, I'll get there first. So I remember I wake my dad up and I was like, hey, Pops, like, I gotta go. He's like, what, really? And I'm like, yeah, I gotta go.
Right.
The baby's asleep, but like, I'll call you when I can. So
you're on.
You're on. Yeah. I got a call. I was like, hey, older gentleman stuck back in a pretty rural part of Montana. I didn't even know what that meant. Like north, south, how far? What's distress mean? Like, so got into the squadron, and I beat everybody there because I live on base, and so they had already been called, so they're coming in, and I started checking the weather, checking to make sure everyone was like legal to go, the go no go items.
Sure.
Just trying to do like the basic, keep my world really small, and be like, okay, like what do I know how to do, and what can I knock off? And at the time, the weather looked okay. Maintenance had already arrived, and we started that process, and we were waiting for the go ahead. So make sure the commander knew exactly what was going on, and the AFRCC could assign a mission number to us, because we can't launch unless we have that number, because there's a lot of levels between us and a rescue. You have all the local, like the sheriff's department, can they get there by land, like by the ground? And then after that, there's like some local third-party companies that actually get involved in this, search and rescue companies that get involved in this. And if they can't go, it comes to us, right?
So how does it get elevated to you guys then? Is that sort of the chain of in which it's got to, like, did the guy call 911? They go to the sheriff, then it goes to somebody else, and they're like, we got to send the big guns in?
No, yeah, it's kind of like that, right? So you got to make sure we're using the right resources. And so apparently, and this is what I was told. He called 911. He's like, hey, I got this kind of pain. Apparently he was post-surgery, like 2 weeks. I don't know if it was like a heart surgery or whatever, but serious enough to call. 911 was like, I can't get any kind of ambulance back there. So call the sheriff. Starts coordinating with the sheriff just like directly on his cell phone. He's back up in this cabin, this empty cabin. Sheriff's like, I can't even get back there. He's like, I might be able to get my snowmobiles in a couple hours. So this poor guy had sat for hours by the time we got called, trying to get, and then so like, right, we'll call Mercy Flight, which is based out of Great Falls.
Yep. Same idea, right? Send an emergency helicopter to go get him?
Send a helicopter, yeah. And I don't know, I didn't get all the details, but there's two things there. Mercy Flight doesn't have a hoist, and so they can't get in to the trees if necessary, or like those restricted areas to get into. And two, they were out of the fight really early. And I don't know if it was like a crew issue, a weather issue, but we were just told Mercy Flight's not in. Okay. And so then they try to look around for like local sheriffs with air assets, maybe a weird one-off. Department of Homeland, are they in the area? Are they operating? And all those were no, right? So we're hitting all the wickets of like, nope. Okay. Contact AFRCC. We know we have this rotary wing asset with a hoist. Send it up to them. They'll run their checklist. They'll run through their chain of command. They'll talk to our chain of command. And then if it's a go, they give us a mission number. That also kind of pays for it, right? Make sure like it's
sure. Like, it's a lot of moving parts, man. Yeah, you're talking about big deal government assets,
right?
You got to make sure everything's in line,
right?
You want to just go save this guy, I'm sure, as fast as you can, but there's just a lot of sort of checks and balance,
right?
Sure that nobody goes rogue, honestly, in an instant like that, which is what you don't want to do. Hey, I want to talk about sort of the actual logistics of going to get him and like what the crew does and all that. What are weather conditions like on this day? Why was it so bad?
So initially it was just cold, right? Winter weather style conditions. We were getting into that early winter, but the issue was it's not when it's really cold, right? It actually could be on your side because everything freezes, right? It doesn't accumulate as well. The helicopters run great when it's cold. It was that kind of in between, right? Where it's, you get around the 30 degrees F, 32 degrees F. So you're freezing, you're not freezing. It accumulates, right? And that also makes the precip a certain way that it likes to stick to helicopters. You have precipitation, right? Also lowers the visibility. At notification, it was okay. It was, I think, a couple miles, few miles visibility. The ceilings were, call them a couple thousand feet. It just okay, we're in the icing conditions. We're in that temperature dew point spread, right? When you get within 3 degrees, that's when you can get onset of fog really quick and freezing fog. So we're it could be bad. But I think we had some snow on the ground too, just a little bit. So it was okay, it looks like it might get worse too. That was forecasted to get worse. But right now we're legal to launch. This is life limb. And so I think let's go. I don't know how that played in with Mercy Flight. Once again, like I said, I haven't got to talk to them, but they were out. We were legal to go. From the moment we were notified. It did get worse, a lot worse, but yeah.
Right, so by the time you get that call, right, that initial call,
right,
to crew assembled, right, Huey en route to go help this guy, how much time is passing here?
Actually read the after action again before we came on just to make sure I had it right. It was an hour before we broke skins.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty damn good.
I felt pretty good about it.
Yeah.
The maintenance guys came in and crushed it in that they got the so the aircraft were tucked away too. They weren't on the pad ready to go. So they have to tow this thing, make sure it's configured right. Because the hoist on the Huey and the end model actually comes on and off.
Yeah.
So you might have a bird that's ready to go, but it might not be configured right amount of gas, right amount, the hoist literally on the aircraft. So they got it all squared away and they were ready to go. And then my aircraft commander arrived and did the double checks, got the okay, and we broke ground in about an hour.
All right. So not only do you get the call, right, because you're standby, you get the call, you're the first one there, but you're on aircraft to go in there. So do you mind taking us through leaving base and going to get him? Do you mind running us through sort of that chain of events?
Yeah. So there was a very small amount of time that we were actually waiting for approval. So I think there was probably only 5 minutes, I would say dead space that okay, we've planned, we're ready to go, waiting on approval. It was go. So walked out to the aircraft, all the stuff was prepped, started it up, no real issues. Maintenance wise, sometimes you have to troubleshoot stuff. We're pretty lucky. There was all the temperatures and pressures where there should be. And the aircraft commander was running all the startup and go. He's a little bit faster than I am at that time, especially as a new guy. And I was doing the navigation. So I was plugging in, we had coordinates, from, I don't know, I think the sheriff got the coordinates from the gentleman, kind of literally doing Google Maps kind of stuff. Cause this guy, it was a weird mixture of it was back tucked into these foothills, like a bowl, if you can imagine, and people lived all around it. So, but you couldn't get in and out. It formed a small mountain pass that they had completely snowed in. And so the sheriff was familiar with this gentleman and where this cabin was. So he dropped us some points on Google Maps, and I was taking that and putting it on our EFB, which is, it's an iPad with flight software on there. Plug it in there and then plug it in the actual aircraft as a Garmin GPS. So I was heads down doing that while he's flying out.
How many people in the crew? How many with you?
That's another thing. So we had pilot, co-pilot, the 2 flight engineers on each side, and then a flight doc. So we got the flight doc in pretty quick too. That's a whole nother process, calling them up. They always have somebody on standby.
Sure.
So call the flight doc, they come in. The guy had actually just been hunting earlier that in the weekend. And so he came running in with all his hunting gear and was changing out real quick. And
right.
I think he had actually just shot an elk or something. I don't
know.
I can't remember. Whatever.
I sure hope he was able to get it.
Whatever was legal for that time. So he was actually all in the mindset of being out in the field. He was ready to go. But yeah, so we got everybody loaded up, with the possibility we were configured to think we might have to get down into the trees. So we had a Stokes litter. It looks like you've probably seen them online. It's a litter that you can lower down via the hoist. But I was trying to zoom in on the satellite imagery and see exactly where this guy was. And there were spaces in the trees, and I was like, I don't know. I have to get overhead to see if it was big enough to put a helicopter in between. It just makes your life easier.
You're talking about trying to land.
Yeah, I was thinking, let's just land if we can. As well as this guy, especially, I don't know his exact condition, right? We just heard chest and stomach pain. The doc's trying to do the Grey's Anatomy, figure it out thing. What does that actually mean, right? What is this guy's actual condition? I don't want to have to hoist him if we don't have to, right?
Yeah,
and the aircraft commander
through more trauma. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The aircraft commander was thinking the same thing. So flew up there, and it was it was like twilight. So we launched basically under night conditions. We had NVGs on, but by the time it was only 20 minutes en route to, by the time we showed up on scene, we already had our NVGs up.
Yep.
So
those are night vision goggles.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No worry. It's all good. I got you.
It was pretty bright by the time we got up, and then but en route we flipped them up because it was easy to see. You could clearly see all the.
So you guys remember back sorry, not to interrupt, but I go back to that episode with Spanky Peterson, and the reason why they sent that Air Force Reserve crew in to go rescue this incredibly high asset, right, in Marcus Luttrell, right, during Red Wings, is that crew had trained up on night vision goggles and had more NVG training time, their reserve crew, than even some active duty crews at the time, because they were just doing so much of it and they were so prepared to do it. And that's why it's like, why'd they send this ragtag group of 6 dudes in reserve crew? It was like, because they were the ones that were ready to go. They had just as much training time as Spanky said, if not more, on those NVGs. So anyways, it's kind of a cool story.
No, for sure. Yeah. We train, you gotta keep currencies and keep a kind of experience up. And so we had a lot of familiarity with the area. So my aircraft commander, he's very familiar. Like I was like, hey, I think this is where we're going, near Dearborn. He's like, yep, been out that way. It was just outside the missile complex. So there's like an imaginary line, if you will, around the entire our part of Montana that it makes up our complex for the 341st Missile Wing. And so this guy had actually just outside of it. And he was 20 minutes southwest near the Dearborn. It was like we followed the Missouri down south, and then we kind of hopped further west.
Flight time from base to go get him.
Yeah, 20 to 25 minutes.
25 minutes. Nice.
Yeah, not too bad, actually.
All right, so once you get down there, right, and you sort of get overhead, do you guys realize we can land? We can go down and get them? What happens then?
So this is a weird part. So no matter what you're going to do, you want to do like a high and low reconnaissance to prepare a site, right? So it's unprepared landing site. We're not going to a helipad. You got to analyze your winds, like what's my power here, like power conditions. So the flight engineers will help you with that. They'll run the numbers per the technical orders and make sure per the conditions, the temperature and all that, and the altitude where you're flying, what your power will be at. What do you have to pull in your left hand? You have 100% available, but to do a 5-foot hover, it's going to take 80% of that power, or whatever, whatever the conditions may be. And then what hazards are in the area, right? So you're running this in your mind. So we get overhead and we do a couple circles, and we don't exactly have his cabin. There's a bunch of little cabins dotted all around the area. Like I said, it was down in a bowl. And so there's like a road down there. And so we kind of looked into it. It snowed enough that we were concerned about a whiteout, very similar to talk about brownout approaches. Actually, the whiteout's pretty horrendous. I'd only experienced brownout, so I was new enough that I really hadn't got a good whiteout approach. So we were kind of concerned about that, and we shot an approach initially just to get on the ground, conserve some fuel, and maybe start looking. We shot an approach to the center of the bowl. There was like a road that was pretty cleared off. We shot near that, came into a high hover, kind of blew out the snow and landed. And then rolled both engines to idle, conserve some fuel, and started talking like, oh man, like there's not a clear cut, like, oh, it's the red cabin, it's right there. Right. It wasn't like that. And funny enough,
do you have comms up with him? Like, is anybody talking to him?
So not with him, it was indirect. So we were talking to the sheriff. We have a pre-coordinated frequencies to speak with the sheriff, search and rescue. So we were talking to him and texting him on the way out there, which is kind of cool thing, here stateside that go out button 6 or whatever. Like you go out your cell phone, talk to.
That's pretty sweet.
The sheriff, and we also had the radios with him, and the sheriff was still having trouble getting the snowmobiles in position and stuff. So it was up to us because we were ready to, if they can affect the rescue with local assets at any point, we were just going to turn back, because there's a certain amount of risk, right? Flying in a helicopter no matter what, and we want to mitigate that. And so he's like, hey, I still can't get back there. We committed, and he was like, he was trying to talk us on to the side of the mountain which he was on, a small hunting cabin. But we couldn't, we were doing a couple passes, we're flying it. I flew a little bit, and then the aircraft commander flew, just looking out. Both flight engineers and the doc were looking for a hunting cabin. It's Montana. It's rural Montana, and there's people all around. So we land, all right. We're going to offload our doc and our flight engineer and have him walk in the direction in which up the mountain we think we saw a cabin that matches the description, right? We have this rough description of where and when, or where and what it looks like. Funny enough, this gentleman pulls up in this Ford, and he's in pajamas, and he gets out and he just starts walking toward the helicopter. We're like, oh, okay, hey, go grab that guy.
Yeah, that's probably our guy.
well, we're like, is this our guy? Like, what's going on? Turns out he's the landowner. He's like, oh, hey. And I don't know what the guy, I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but he's like, oh, Jeff lives up that way. We're like,
Right.
what? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, he's an older gentleman. He described the guy. He's like in his 60s or something.
That's our guy
like,
then, yeah.
I'm like, that's our guy. He's like, I think he's back up that way. And so he kind of points. And so our poor flight doc and flight engineer just start walking. And they end up walking 1.5 miles in the snow.
I was going to say, how far are you guys from the your made up LZ, right? To where you got to go find this guy.
Yeah. No, it was like something that your parents would say, like uphill in the snow. Like these poor guys are walking up the hill. And eventually, like one of the locals, they can move about this bowl, right? You can move it. Freedom of movement was no problem, but you just couldn't get out via the land, right? And so, because at one point, the aircraft commander and I looked at each other like, hey, what are we doing here? Like, should we just see if they can get the ambulance in? Like, and it turned out you couldn't, the roads were bad, that you couldn't get out.
Yeah. So all of their assessment was pretty accurate. You guys were the only way in and out.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny situation, right? And the weather's still kind of good here. Like it's bright out, the ceilings are high enough that we're comfortable. We're like, okay, cool, we'll figure this out. We offload the dock. I had an LMR, land mobile radio, to the dock and the flight engineer. So once we got back up in the air, we start circling again. We could talk to them. Hey, like where?
To get a little bit closer to them, right? So you guys pick them up. Yep.
And that's exactly what happened. So they end up. More locals come out and like, oh, I know exactly where he's at. And it turns out to be a very tiny cabin. It's like more of like a shack, right? This guy kind of used, I think, for hunting, right? So, we once we find out the site, we start to once again do the high and low reconnaissance, and we find out that we don't have to do a hover. It's going to be able to get to the site, but it's pretty tight. We could just fit the Huey in this clearing in the trees. And so the aircraft commander elected to take it and fly it himself. Which I wasn't too upset about. Like I said, roughly new guy. Like I didn't want to damage an aircraft first search and rescue out the gate. Sure. So, shot an approach, and it was basically to about a 50-foot hover above the trees, and then we just elevator down straight into the zone. Once again, kind of worried about whiteout, but we use you can use a higher hover technique to blow the snow out, at least the loose stuff, and then you just get a good reference, a vertical reference, and bring it all the way to the ground.
And you're not having to like rush down there, right? Like obviously you want to get them out of there safely. But it's not like we got to get down there now, so you've got some time, I guess, to mitigate some of those potential problems.
Right. Absolutely. And that the guy I was flying with he's a real smooth, like just calm. He's actually got picked up for test pilot school, Navy test pilot school. So he's a really great instructor. I actually known him from before I got to the 40th. So really good dude. And he was like just really calm, and he flew it to the ground, no problem. He let me do a lot, which was awesome. He let me do a lot, but like when it came to the real like brass tacks, he took it for him. I'm gonna do this one, man. I got hundreds more hours than you do, so it was cool. No, I appreciated it. And we landed, and then the doc had already gotten to the gentleman, found him, confirmed it was him. And another thing is they had offloaded the Stokes litter, and they had been carrying this thing up and down the hill.
Oh, jeez, these guys were
working it. And so we're in the zone. They get the guy, and they only have to move him, I don't know, 200 yards from his cabin. Some local people actually had come up and drove up and helped actually carry the guy down. I think I have a picture somewhere of these guys carrying him down in the litter. Older gentleman for sure, and kind of a bigger guy though. So I'm glad they came down to help, and they loaded him on the aircraft. We got everybody buttoned up. And then once again, we start doing the power game. Like, okay, we now have additional weight on board. These are the conditions. We're a little bit higher than we were, and then that initial approach at the bottom of the bowl. And the margins are going to be super tight. Basically, like we're going to have to pull. We have 100% available. We're going to have to pull to like 99 to get. And it was called. We had to do an out of ground effect hover, right? So it had to be. I guess the trees were roughly about 50 feet, and so the aircraft commander had to pull in the power and come up absolutely perfectly vertical because he didn't really have any room left or right. I think it was really tight towards the tail, right? So you're always worried about the tail rotor getting put into something. And so we came up to the tree line. I remember like right at the top of the trees. And we stopped climbing. Like it's like, call it 55-foot trees. And we stopped at like 50. We're like, oh man. So we kind of sat there in the hover, like holding it and like hoping the wind would kind of change. And like he got to move the tail just a little bit more into the wind and kind of just eked at that last
bit.
Yeah. And then like up and down the hill. Right. So it was really good flying his part. And I'm just scanning the gauges, watching for limits. There's a certain amount of time you can be at that power, especially at the top end that high. So it worked out. And then we started to fly home, and that's when things got kind of interesting because we started to fly to the mountains, right? Called back to base, like, hey, we got the guy. We're inbound to Benefits. We tried to fly directly back to the hospital, but the Mercy Flight helicopter couldn't be moved. Those guys weren't even there to move the helicopter.
Oh, so it's on the pad you'd have to get to drop them off at the hospital.
Right.
So they don't have a parking spot for you.
We don't have a parking spot. We're like, oh man.
Like, fine, we can tether him down. Can we tether him down?
I was like,
I'm not trying to make light of it, but you can't go back.
Yeah.
So basically they're telling you can't go to the hospital.
Can't go direct to the hospital, which nobody likes, right? Like he was pretty stable. The doc's like, like he's not actively dying right now. He's, and the doc's doing his thing, but he's like, we're like, well, let's get him offloaded. It's 20 minutes. Like, let's fly as fast as we can direct to the hospital. I was like, can we land in like a one-time waiver to land in the parking lot? Like, let's go to the hospital, and it wasn't going to work out. And I was like, dang. And so we ended up electing to fly to Great Falls, which is only like 5 minutes. But it still was kind of a bummer. And then we were in a transload on an ambulance. And this was going back and over the radio as we're coming back. But also as that's happening, I think I was flying at this point. My aircraft commander looks up and it's just like a wall of gray, angry gray, snow clouds. Not even just like, oh, that looks like it's going to be bad. Like it's actively, snowing. We're like, oh man. And so we're calling Great Falls, calling Malmstrom, like, what are you seeing? Like, what's the weather reporting? And Great Falls was closed. Like the airport was closed to like commercial traffic and everything like that. And so the minimums had dropped to a point in which we're starting to talk about like, okay, are we like, where are we going to go to make it legal? Even make sense. Like,
sure.
We got our rules, but also like what makes sense, what's safe. We're like, and we were like looking at our gas and seeing where we could divert to, and it was good enough to proceed. So we went under special VFR rules. So it got down to about a half-mile visibility, and the ceilings got pretty low on us, right down to about where our minimums are for our helicopter, right? So we're about 500 feet off the ground, about a half-mile viz, and we're just trying to get back to Great Falls. And we know like we're very familiar with the obstacles, so we're on the map, right? As I'm flying, my aircraft commander is on the map looking at the known towers, the known wires, right? Kind of like, okay, this path is good, like continue. And we're constantly talking to ourselves, like, okay, I can still see on this side. What about your side? He's like, no, don't turn any more to the right. Like continue this path you're on, because if you go more to the right, we're gonna pop into the IFR conditions, the clouds, and that's no good for anybody on board. We're capable, but like I said, the icing threat was there. It's really tough to fly, and we don't need to add any more complications. So fingers crossed, we made it back to Great Falls, and as we got into like the actual aerodrome itself, it was relatively clear just right over the airport. I'm talking like I could see the end of their runway, which was nice. And so we came back around, shot the approach, and that was my first true wide out, like to an airfield, which is actually worse than a like unprepared landing zone because there's no like trees or bushes to use. It's like concrete.
Yeah, no reference point, right?
No reference point, 6 inches of fresh powder, right? And it was like, oh man, so it was pretty horrendous. And once again, like I said, like I was trying to fly it like I flew my last helicopter, and like they're just completely different styles of approaches. So Dave, the aircraft commander, as an instructor, was trying to like talk me through it and instruct me on like, hey, like I know you're used to this, but do X and all that kind of stuff. But we made it to the ground, and then the funny thing was, I was like, cool, we're good, right? Like awesome, like he's like, you got a taxi now, and in the Huey, you air taxi. So you got to get back up and then like blow the cloud the whole way. So like the flight's never over. You're flying the whole time, right? So I'm this massive wide out cloud just trying to taxi to the ambulance because we were going to translate in the ambulance, right? And so I was like, oh man, it never ends. Like it doesn't stop. Like we made it here, like woohoo, like we survived. And then it's like, oh wait, I got to taxi another 100 yards in like complete wide out conditions. So yeah, once we got there, they were ready for us. The ambulance was already there, thank goodness. And so they translated him no problem. And got back. And then, so I was like, cool, we're good to go. Like, we're ready to shut down. Like, and then my aircraft commander's like, no, man, it's still legal enough to go. Let's go get this aircraft back to base so it can hold the alert and be ready to go. So I was on the aircraft, I was on the sticks, and he's like, all right, let's go. We took off and flew back to Malmstrom, which is like a 5-minute flight. It's not bad. And there's lots of references in the city that you can fly back to. And but then I had to come back and shoot another wide out approach to a helipad, which was like another like 6 inches of pressure.
It's a big day for you.
I was like, oh man, like as far as not doing wide out, I picked a day to get real, like my training day for sure. Yeah.
But you guys got him off, right? They get him to the ambulance, and sort of at that point, all right, we've done our part. We head home. from that call, I'm just interested. You might not know. I think you probably do, but from that call at 4 a.m. to you now have got him to the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
How much time are we talking about here?
So I don't know. I guess I could do it math backwards, but I heard total from his initial 911 call, it was 12 hours. Like wow. he was in a bad way for like 12 hours. Which is, it's rough. It was like at some point during the night, he feels bad enough to call and then like goes to the sheriff, and obviously it starts coming. By the time he was picked up and like brought to benefits, about 12 hours.
Wow. Incredible. All right. So you guys get back to Malmstrom and your sort of mission complete at that point. By the time you get back, you've now navigated yourself through a pair of whiteouts. So you put those on the learning report card, which is pretty incredible. You said your wife was gone that weekend, right? So that's why
you was. Yeah, she was.
Like, how's work going?
Yeah, no, it was funny. She texted me. I was like, said something about where she was at, right? I think she's back in Phoenix, where we're from. And she was like, oh, this. And I was like, oh, me too. And I sent her a picture of like the zone we were waiting in while we were like kind of figuring out, where is this guy? She's like, oh, laugh, thinking like I sent a picture of like something about the office. Like, oh, this is at the office.
Sure.
And she's like, wait, are you at work right now? I was like, yeah, I'm at work.
Oh, yeah.
Or debriefing. She's like, are you serious? I was like, yes, we got called. She knew I was on alert, but she's like, oh, no way you get called. So, yeah, it happened.
So to get to go out on this one, JC, and just be a part of something like this and just see all the moving parts that could go into it, right? And I even think about, your aircraft commander just talking you through so many parts of that. It's got to be a bit of it's a powerful day, man, to be a part of something like that. So just your personal thoughts on just when you look back on it, and look, it could have been way worse, but everything kind of, even with all those hiccups, worked out. You're able to get that guy the care he needed. So just your thoughts kind of looking back on it.
It was crazy. It was really, it's not a great descriptor. It was really surreal, right? So like I said, I spent like 2.5 years, training up and trying to do that combat search and rescue mission. And, obviously their motto is that others may live, and I deployed to HKIA in support of the withdrawal. And I didn't get to do any kind of rescue there. I didn't really get to, I only played a very small part. I left kind of early to see my daughter get my first child be born. So, that was kind of hanging with me. I'm like, man, I wish I could have helped more people, all during all that chaos in August and in Kabul, and so it was kind of with me for sure. And getting here has been a fresh start. And then immediately right out the door to get to help somebody in like the community and it, a lot lower threat, but it really it helped me kind of put everything in perspective. Something small, but we got to help this guy. Who knows if the sheriff could have got to him in time. And I don't know his medical status, and it could have got a lot worse, right? And so I felt really blessed for that to happen. And then also talk about like world class like just training, like with my aircraft commander, and then like with his experience and stuff, just talking me through it like live as we're doing it. I'm never going to get better experience, and I hopefully can pass that down the way, right? And have that in my hip pocket, and like, all right, man, like if we get in a similar situation, I can use my experience now that my aircraft commander walked me through, and just like life circumstance. So it was really surreal, and sometimes it was crazy. I'm like, I can't believe that happened already. I only got here in June, and like here we are doing the thing. So yeah.
Maybe it's not as adventurous the rest of the way. I mean,
I know that's what guys say. They're like,
I hear you though, man. You think back to that summer and just, and maybe I wonder if your mindset was like, we're going to Afghanistan. We're going to go save a bunch of people. Like, let's go save some of these folks from this terrible thing. And then that doesn't come into fruition. And I could understand why you'd be feeling like, man, I just wanted to do some good, but to get this chance, the Lord works in mysterious ways, man. No consequences or no coincidences. That's for sure the way it kind of works out.
Yeah, I feel really lucky too, because I got the not best of both worlds, but it was an interesting dynamic that I can't say enough good things about the folks that I went with. Yeah. They actually ended up doing some stuff there, helping some people, not really the helicopter way, but they helped some folks there. The rescue unit that went, I left early and they got me out just so I could see my daughter. And we actually didn't know. I left within like a couple of days of all like losing control of the airfield and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of worked a deal. They got me on a C-17 back early because they knew my daughter was being born, and so we had no idea. And then a couple of days later, right, the whole thing falls apart. And so those guys made it happen for me. And so I got to be a part of it, a little small part of it. But those guys helped some people. I got to see my daughter be born, and then I get here, which is awesome. I love Malmstrom. I love the flying, and then I get to almost immediately after I become combat mission ready, get through my initial training here, be a part of something small like this. It was cool. It's a really cool way.
Yeah. Great work, man. It really is an incredible story picking up the 6. And when we saw it, we're like, yeah, we got to talk about that on these airwaves. He's Captain JC Soto. Before we go, I got a few texts, but you got to tell me everything you know about spy balloons. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'll get you. I'll get us all in trouble.
Deal. We don't have to, my public affairs specialist.
Yes, no, we don't have to do that. It's all good, man. Grateful for the time. Great storytelling, man. Really good. And just thankful for all you've done on behalf of our nation, what you've been asked to do and what you'll continue to do. And just fun talking to you today.
Well, it was great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
He's Captain JC Soto. I'm Brian Jodis. That's been this episode of Pick Up the 6 podcast.